What's up, guys? Today we are going to talk about Unit 3, National Income and Price Determination, Topic 3.5, which is Equilibrium in the ADAS model. In this video, we're going to cover full employment, and we're going to cover negative and positive output gaps. All right, so let's get to it. Topic 3.5, Equilibrium in the ADAS model. All right, so we want to go ahead, and we've talked about AD, and we've talked about AS. We want to put those two together with the long-run aggregate supply curve and see what all that looks like on our graph, okay? Now, remember that we have here our long-run aggregate supply curve. We're going to add in a aggregate supply curve, and we're going to add in an aggregate demand curve, right? Okay, and so here we have our equilibrium point. So we're producing at full employment at this point, right? And you can see that right here, that whenever you're on the long-run aggregate supply curve, you're producing at full employment. Now, there are two types of, two gaps that we're going to look at, right? And so we're going to look at the inflationary gap, and we're going to look at a recessionary gap. So let's first look at an inflationary gap. So an inflationary gap would be anything to the right where the equilibrium point or aggregate supply and aggregate demand intersect when you're to the right of the long-run aggregate supply curve. So we can look at it as something like maybe this. This would be an inflationary gap, right? And why is that an inflationary gap? It's an inflationary gap because you are beyond full employment, right? You have a very low unemployment. You have a lot of people working, so a lot of people have dollars in their hands, and those dollars are going to be spent, and so prices are going to increase, causing inflation to occur, right? And so it could be over here, right? Or it could have been an aggregate demand curve shift, right? Anything to the right of the LRAS or long-run aggregate supply curve will be an inflationary gap. Now, let's go ahead and remove this inflationary gap, right? And let's look at a recessionary gap. Now, a recessionary gap is when the AD and AS intersection point, that's to the left of the long-run aggregate supply curve. So we can put something right here, right? And the intersection point, again, is to the left. And now we have what is called a recessionary gap. And recessionary gap is going to be when you have less than full employment, right? So you have very high unemployment, right? Less than full employment, right? You have very high unemployment, meaning you have greater than maybe 8%, 9% unemployment, right? And so here you're at a negative output gap, right? On the right, you're at a positive output gap, okay? And of course, then there's full employment, and that's the full employment equilibrium where we had this one right here, right? Where the intersection point is right where the LRAS is, right? So those are our two gaps, right? So, or three places that that you could be in an ADAS model. You can be in an inflationary gap, which is to the right of the LRAS. You can be in a recessionary gap, which is to the left of the LRAS, or you could be right on the LRAS, which is full employment, right? Now, let's compare this model to, like, let's say the business cycle, right? So if we're in the business cycle, and I keep moving the aggregate supply curve, but I think you guys get the point. But here we're at a positive output gap. Positive output gap, we'd have low unemployment, right? That means a lot of people are working. We're in an inflationary gap. That means we'd be at a peak of our business cycle, right? Or we would be very close to our maximum production, the maximum production for a possibilities curve, right? A PPC. Now, again, this would be positive output. Now, if we were to look at negative output, right? Let's change. this is negative output, right? We're in a recessionary gap. Okay, we have very high unemployment. Okay, so we would be at a trough in our business cycle, right? We would need to speed up the economy. Okay. Or we would be within our PPC curve, right, at a point of inefficiency or very low employment, right? All right, so that's going to do it for that today. Appreciate you guys, and see ya.